Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to MSP Community Live. Matt Topper here. Usually I say something about Ray not being here, but he hasn't been here in like 4 months now. So I think, Josh, you're basically the official co-host at this point. How's it
Yeah,
going?
I just got a promotion apparently, so it's a great morning.
Apparently.
Yeah, just handing them
we
out.
we always say good morning, good afternoon, but I think about our audience and we're on the East Coast, right?
Well,
Everybody else is just
I'm in the
more
central. I'm in
morning,
the middle. Yeah, I'm
but
in the
it's more
middle.
morning. It's not afternoon.
We could have some
Hmm.
We could have some international people. I don't know,
Hmm.
Danny. Can we pull the
Curious,
stats? Do we get the live stream stats from where people are tuning in from?
right?
Uh,
Anybody from further east of here?
yeah. Uh, they could be in a. I think there's like is it Prince Edward Island in Canada? It's like even more east, and they have like their literal own time zone. So I think they're 2 hours ahead.
That's true. Okay.
So,
Excuse me. So for them, it's afternoon. Got it.
yeah, absolutely. So if anyone's watching from there, then yes, good afternoon.
So how's your week going?
Yeah,
Anything noteworthy? Anything interesting?
the kids are in school, so you won't hear any crazy shenanigans in the background. They are back to school, and the house is much quieter as a result. Also, much cleaner.
Nice.
Uh,
Not too much going on here. Just getting some end of month deadline things going on. Mets are unfortunately on the West Coast right now, so I don't get to watch much baseball. So I guess that's good for productivity, bad for wanting to watch my team. But enough of that. We can talk MSP Community Live. If anybody wants to
I
talk
mean,
baseball, you know where to
well,
find me.
I was gonna say they did pull up a pretty big upset against the Padres, so I'm sure you're excited about
It's a
that.
big deal.
Yeah.
I am excited about that, right? Padres and D-backs are coming up next on the schedule. Everyone who's in front of them in the wild card race. So that potentially good news. And as usual on these West Coast games, watch an inning or two and check the score in the morning.
Or you'll need more coffee.
Yeah, so you'll notice I don't have McDonald's coffee today. I made my own travel mug. Very exciting stuff.
Perfect. Nothing here. I just got I got some water, but I did have a caramel apple coffee this morning, so that was about 2 hours ago. It's fall. I'm a pumpkin guy, but I don't like pumpkin spice lattes. My coffee is I need bougie black beans, but you can pumpkin spice everything else, like
So the
almonds,
trick
all
with
that
that
stuff.
is to not think of them as coffee drinks, really. More
It's
of like
true.
a snack or dessert that happens to have coffee flavor in it. And then the pumpkin spice latte starts making a lot more sense.
That is true. I don't like the milkiness of the drink itself. But yeah, I mean, I had some pumpkin spice almonds last week that were fantastic. So, but let's go ahead and get into these stories here. We got quite a few today, and
yeah, and I think the audience will leave if we subject them to more of this banter. We're not
right.
in the entertainment business.
Well, okay, so in our first story here, we have a longtime MSP customer that wants to go hourly. So, for the SOP, they posted they've had a MSP customer that they've had a good relationship with, but they sold to a larger company. And the larger company, when that happens, sometimes the MSP is usually part of the transition, or they, have their own MSP, their own internal, etc. But in this particular case, they don't want to do either. They want to keep the MSP on, but they want to have an hourly rate of $100 an hour. So,
First of all,
yeah.
I'll let you keep going. That just jumped out at me as the first problem.
Well, I mean that was pretty much it. So, how would you handle it if you're this MSP owner here? You had a
So I'm going to try and answer this without using the phrase, in that there is a decision tree based on how you're structured as an organization here. If you're primarily and essentially only set up to deal with recurring regular clients, then don't touch this. If you have some experience with co-managed If you have a separate professional services department that knows how to do one-off engagements or knows how to handle this type of thing, then it's okay. And I say that based on some experience. We had a couple of clients that were like this from the beginning almost. I used to say they complained about everything except the bill, and they wanted to do hourly. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You'll pay us for T&M work all day long. The problem is that supporting a client hourly is different than when you have full control over the entire stack, over the entire network and decision-making ability. And your procedures, your processes, all of that are probably wrapped around how to provide service to a traditional managed services client. And when you get into the ad hoc kind of work, even if they're regular clients, the calculus changes so that you have support desk people thinking about how long the call is when we're having to deal with hours quick. And of course, you always say, hey guys, don't worry about the bill, let the account managers handle it, all that stuff. I though think your managed services decision, whether that's your whole company or whether that's just a department, that group needs to be doing traditional managed services only. And if you've developed some kind of one-off capability or a co-managed capability, or sometimes a pro services department, but for the most part, you want them doing projects, then it can be okay. So I think I successfully danced around saying the specific two words we used to answer everything, but kind of did make that point anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you pretty much gave all of the information that you needed to give with that. I mean, like your decision tree. If your company doesn't do hourly and they only do like all you can eat engagements, then at this point you just say, well, hey, sorry, but we can refer you to some, break fix MSPs potentially. Also, the $100 an hour seems extremely low. First off,
Extremely low. I mean, I guess it could be area, but even still, I can't think of anywhere that would charge that low.
Geek Squad doesn't even charge that low. I mean, there's no way you're getting that from an MSP. And I say this going into a previous MSP I worked at. I was the rent-a-tech, for lack of a better word, the designated staffing augmentation, right? So I was, for all intents and purposes, a tier 3 employee for a large client of ours. And I enjoyed doing it. It was fine. I was in the daily stand-ups. I worked with their vendors. I mean, I basically worked for this company, but my MSP signed my paycheck and gave me the benefits, right?
Yeah.
So all that was good, but the business hat on me, like I knew what they were charging for this, and it was a extremely reduced rate. And now, yes, I understand that you can, they're also like, hey, if we have this relationship, we can sell hardware and things like that. But I don't feel that they really looked at the cost of goods all that great, because at this point it was about 95 an hour, and I was the highest paid engineer. I normally build 215 an hour at that point. And if I didn't do any other work and all we did was this contract for a year, the MSP lost money on just my salary, not even giving into my overhead. So just because and I mean, the reason they did it, was, well, this was one of our largest clients. We've had this relationship, right? And I'm sure, they made it up with other things, but on just that particular thing, like, is it worth keeping that contract with that large client, even though you're technically losing money on it? You would have to figure out how much hardware, how many other licenses that you need to sell to make up that margin. But your margin is made in your labor. So you have to, I mean, if you're going to keep them, I don't think $100 an hour is going to be the right answer. You do your cost of goods and figure out what that potentially could be. And, maybe you can come up with something, but I think the decision tree is the right answer here. If you,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I
say,
thought you were
if you
wrapping
don't
up.
do hourly, then give them some referrals.
I think in terms of cost, you nailed the point that yes, there could be a reason, relationship wise, right? Maybe this client's going to leave if they don't have that guy as their primary tech, or something like that. It's just like if you're talking cybersecurity, when you're getting into risk discussions, just let a reduced rate be a calculated decision and you're doing it for a reason, as opposed to it's just your default rate and you don't even realize you're losing money on them. If there are legitimate reasons to give a longtime client a good rate, um, just just don't do it by accident or by ignorance, right? It's just like when we talk about risk, saying ignoring is not one of the effective risk treatment options, though perhaps the most common one.
Dr. Zoidberg, I did find your comment, and I do agree with this too. So he basically said, give a large but not comically large number and assume that they're paying it up front. So that way it's like to put it bluntly, it's kind of that FU price, right? Like you make it, too high, but then you're like, oh, there's no way they're going to go for this. But then if they do it, it makes it, makes it kind of worthwhile. So, I think anything else you want to add to this one?
Yes, I will very softly disagree with the FU price thing. I used to do that, and every now and then someone would take it, and I'd be mad at myself for even giving them the option because it was work I really, really didn't want to do anyway. And now I'm thinking, oh man, now I have to go do this thing that's going to be like totally blow up my schedule, and like it's not in our domain really, and all that stuff. And if it's work I don't want, I just didn't want it, right? Like there was a reason for that. Then that took a couple of accepting those exorbitant prices for me to realize I should just say no.
It's tough. I mean, there's, going back to our patented answer, it depends. It depends on the relationship, how long it's been, the benefits of keeping it. But I think at the end of the day, it does come down to your decision tree. If this isn't something that you do, then don't do it. Oh, that's too small. I'm learning how to do this screen share thing. We're learning live here. Look at this.
Wow. Live demos. It's risky.
It is, yeah. Test and production.
Did you check what tabs you had open before you screen shared?
No, of course not. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go to the next one here. What do we got? Network only support. Does anyone have MSP plans for networking only in a co-managed scenario? We've been asked to look at just their firewall and VPN to ensure uptime is kept and services aren't blocked. An on-site team handles the computers, therefore will only be required for network support. Not sure how to price this. So, how many S's is this? MSNP?
Managed networking support. So I think I have two answers to this. My first kind of only half serious answer is that this is a great way to get blamed for every problem that every application has from here to the end of time. Right? I feel like it'll be a constant game of trying to prove it's not the network for every issue. A more serious answer is that I have done engagements like this, where for me, and I think you do some work like this too, Josh, is that it comes with slightly bigger orgs who have primarily server admins and don't really have experience doing large scale networks. That has gone okay, and it really, if you have a good relationship with the client and you're very clear about what the scope of networking only support includes, it can work. But it tends to devolve into things like, we have one access point in the middle of this ridiculous room that's basically a Faraday cage, and we're annoyed that it doesn't get next door, and like all these kind of weird issues that come up. And it turns into a very defensive kind of client and often stressful. So I won't say it's a bad idea. I'll say that it can be a good idea under the correct circumstances if the client is mature enough to really understand what they're asking for, and you're very good about defining who is responsible for what in your scope of support document.
So you would say you would need a shared responsibility matrix.
I was trying not to use the phrase, but yes, you would.
It's a great
need
phrase
that
to
would
use.
help significantly.
Yeah. So there's nothing inherently wrong with this, right? There's no reason that you can't figure out a per device, maybe it's 150 or 250 a month, whatever that would be, right? Um, there are some positives and negatives to it. Particularly like I guess our MSP, we don't operate like this. We're a full technology partner. So this is something that we would pass on. But again, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but you do run the risk of having that transactional relationship to where if you're managing the network, then it's like, oh, it's the network's problem. So you're not trying to assist. All you're trying to do is prove that it's not the network's problem, rather than trying to find, to help and work with them. You're just like, well, no, it's not. It's the server problem. And then the server guys, no, it's the network problem. And now you're butting heads to figure out whose problem it is instead of working together. So if you believe that can be avoided, go for it.
The other thing is this dovetails with the story we talked about a few minutes ago, in that you don't want to do this if the entire rest of your client base is soup to nuts complete IT support, because now you're operating differently for one specific client, and it throws all of your procedures and processes out the window. And now you find yourself trying to recreate ways of doing things and business processes for just this one client. It's probably not worth it.
The poor ops person who has to, oh, well, this client, trying to do the contracts and the billing reconciliation. Well, this is a weird one off here. Now this is a weird one off here. I mean, it really, messes up the back office side of things.
Yeah. And the final thing I'll say on this is that depending on the complexity of the environment you're taking on, at least in my experience, when someone's asked for this, it's been a rather complex situation, like that needed a dedicated network admin. You can find yourself losing some of your higher resources, not helping your normal MSP clients, trying to deal with this one-off thing. And now all of a sudden the guy who, or girl, the person who comes in and is supposed to be that, right, the stopper, right, the ace, if we're still talking sports terms, and deal with the fires that nobody else can put out. Now he's tied up dealing with some weird routing issue at a client that doesn't even represent a significant revenue portion. So take that into account as well. Kind of the same risk that you take when you promote your most senior tech to a manager. You lose them. You also have the risk of losing them if they're off doing their own special thing. I have a story about that. We had a client that was all Linux based. And in my career before MSP, I was mostly Linux admin, Linux and network guy. So I'm like, okay, I'll take on this, just me. They understood that. They were fine with waiting for me to be available on things because there just wasn't a lot of Linux support locally in the city we're in. And it worked out not that great because I ended up spending a ton of time over at their office and fell behind on everything else. Really, it's a danger to think about when you start getting into that. Yeah, we have somebody who can deal with this. If it's taking you out of your core competency, what you're trying to really do as a business, be really sure you want to go down that road.
Yep. We did have a question in the chat. What about reselling licenses, but they don't want managed support? Do you pass on the license?
No.
I mean, that's it.
If somebody just wants to buy something, we'll sell it to them.
Yeah. That one seems pretty cut and dry. Like, it's a license. We're not doing any support whatsoever. Here's your license renewal. Depending on the firewall, it might stop working if they don't buy the license. So it makes your job easier.
It does make sense. Like, as we got bigger as an organization, there were some vendors that we had very good pricing from, better than you could get from direct in some cases, or certainly better than the local providers they may be working with. And we had customers who would just buy stuff from us just to take advantage of the price, and we still made money on it. And all it cost was some administrative time to deal with the back end stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. All right. Well, I think we can go on to our next one here. This is one that I like here. Question: do you bill for reconnaissance missions? So
I liked the title. I didn't even read the description yet.
Yeah, you're out doing the recon, like wearing the war paint and the camo, like scoping out the office a little bit. So they onboarded a new client last month and they're trying to move over to Office 365, but no one seems to know who owns the current domain. They don't have any billing information or they don't want to look for it. And they've basically said, hey, this is an IT problem, figure it out. The owner gave us a stack of paperwork, wanted us to sift through it, see if there's anything related to the domain. And I mentioned it'd be billable hours, to which we replied, we're already paying you. This is your job. They're getting all kinds of other services, and this is such a simple thing to figure out that it makes me angry. Their email is pop email. And they've had their domain for over 20 years. They're integrating with a CRM software that sends clients emails automatically, but we can't find the info other than incoming and outgoing servers from Outlook, and nobody knows passwords. So the clock is ticking away at billable hours, in my opinion, and the customer has no motivation to look for any information regarding the domain because we're not billing them. He has no intention of paying for it. I'm half tempted to let the domain croak when the email stops working. He'll be more interested in solving the problem. What would you do? So the body here
There's so
doesn't
much to
match
unpack here.
the body doesn't match the question. So what do we want to tackle here? We could tackle both, but where should we start?
So I'll just briefly, like I know I tend to go on monologues, but I will briefly say what I think is wrong with this scenario. Then we can unpack as far as how you got there. The problem is this is a project and it's not being billed as a project. And more importantly, there was not a statement of work with assumptions or client responsibilities in the statement of work. That is the 2-sentence answer to why this is coming up at all.
Yep. We run all of our onboardings as a project, and the service desk or the help desk, the regular managed service part of our business doesn't touch the client until the onboarding project is done. This is the first MSP that I worked at that did it that way. And I'm like, this is the way to do it. I think full stop, honestly, because there's these things that come up. There's certain, minimums or certain questions, and even things that we need to do, such as deploying our tools and getting them on, certain baselines and things like that. So, we have a dedicated project support to do that. And like you said, if this was built as a project before it reached the reoccurring monthly rate, whatever that would be, then it's a null point.
So yes, onboarding is a project, but even a migration for an existing client is also a project. And just to make clear to everyone, the issue with this is that when you're scoping out a project for a customer, you have a defined statement of work, right? Just like any other project you might do with a vendor or anything like that. There's 2 sections in the statement of work that would impact this. One is going to be an assumptions section. What assumptions are is basically saying if any of these assertions, or earlier if we're going to use technical programming stuff, if any of these assertions don't hold, that potentially becomes billable, right? So one of the assumptions in your SOW is client has all necessary passwords for the existing system and service so we can gain access. So that right there is enough. But the other thing is that when you're going through and preparing the scope of work for this project, the discovery phase of this should be uncovering that to begin with. The way that I did it was I usually would not bill for discovery. I would if I was pretty sure that they were just trying to get something to give to a competitor, like a shopping list. In fact, I really just wouldn't do it at that point. But the way to do it is you just build in the time writing the scope of work into the final labor estimate. I totally lost my train of thought. So during the discovery, you would be finding this, and putting together the scope or statement of work is what allows you to really dial in the project. And then when you get to the execution phase, you're not really finding any of the roadblocks anyway. There's also, to your point, there's like 10 things wrong with this. Yeah. To your point, Josh, this is arguably something that should have been discovered during initial onboarding as well, right? So let's say that this is, forget even a second that we're talking about onboarding or doing migration projects as projects versus, projects as tickets or other low OML type things. What are you doing during onboarding if you don't have the creds to the domain? Like you
Yep.
would think, even if for some reason you are keeping a POP or IMAP or some email system around, aren't you probably putting a spam filter in front of it? Like, wouldn't you have had to deal with that during onboarding anyway?
Yeah, something with that. I mean, like full stop without those, like the project stops, the onboarding stops. Like we can't support you until we get this information. So we can, work with you and help you find it, but like we can't move forward without this. So getting that information is required. I mean, it's not like a domain account where like, well, we need to put our whatever, if you have like a shared admin account or something, or your service account. I mean, this is a completely different thing, and like you said, it should be built as a product. This isn't just part of onboarding. And having the is it, I don't know if it would be covered in the MSA or some sort of contract. Like, what is a project versus what is part of the standard monthly managed service as well, would also have prevented this argument. Like, oh, I'm paying you, this is your job. Like, no, this is something different. This is outside the normal scope of our works. Like, this would be considered a project because it's a one-time thing. So yeah, there's so much wrong with it here. And even like, if you find that they're running on POP, I mean, to me, that would be like, hey, we're not supporting you because of the risks or whatever until you get into the 21st century. So we need commitment. You're doing this project first off. Like, that would be a red flag for me to try to find them as finding them as a client.
Yeah, what I'm seeing with this is an organization that doesn't quite have the project workflow and process dialed in yet. This is the kind of thing that just, as you start getting some reps and maturing about how projects go, and I bet next time they won't have this issue again. But to answer the direct question, I would like to bill for the, like, if I found myself in this position, man, I don't know what I would do. I would like to say that I would bill for the fact finding. I probably would, but I'm guessing there might not even be an MSA really in this case to point to. So you may be stuck. In general, I like to bill for this kind of thing, but no one's ever going to pay it, right? So you just have to make it up in the final project labor. That's what we talked about a few minutes ago. Like, yeah, in theory, you should bill for your discovery, but no one's going to get a bill to basically receive a quote. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's one of those where like you get the free assessment or whatever, but like we've said before, you just build it into the final project. It gets made up for somewhere along the lines, but typically you're not billing for it.
Yes. So the takeaway here is scope your projects. Spend some time scoping projects and put in assumptions, client responsibilities, things that are out of scope, things that are in scope, anything that's going to shoot you in the foot later during a project, get it written down.
Yeah. So speaking of companies using POP for email, that is a segue into our next story here, our next question. And what are signs of a bad company? So this person's, I'm trying to improve my business, but sometimes it's hard to see what I'm doing wrong or not doing at all. What are red flags if you are a customer looking for an MSP, or if you're a MSP company looking into a potential partner?
Where's Dean?
using POP email is a red flag for me. But what are some red flags?
So here's the thing. Using POP email probably is a red flag, but not necessarily in that. The red flag for me would be using POP without some kind of really good reason for it or some kind of plan to migrate off or something like that, right? If they're a disaster technically and are in the middle of dealing with that disaster, that's not necessarily the sign of a bad company. And that's the sign of a company that badly needs my help is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, like I guess to go, I wouldn't just say, oh, POP email, like, sorry, you can't talk to me. Like, what are the reasonings behind it, right? Explain yourself, and then based on your explanation, then we can make a determination if we can help, or if you just don't value technology and we're not going to be a good partner.
Yes. So I think what you just said is really what encompasses a good or bad client or prospect from my perspective, and that is, do you genuinely want my help. And I don't just mean from a can I fix your computer standpoint? Can I configure your router correctly? Um, do you have a real interest in working together, meaning you, customer, are going to be putting in some effort as well, equal effort, in fact, in many cases, more effort in getting this thing up and running, operational, so that it's a real improvement for your business versus, yeah, we just want to make sure our PCs are updated and we have someone to call when they break, right? That's not a good customer for me. That's not a good company. Um, so some signs of that are if the only thing that they are shopping on is price, that is not a good company. It's not a good client. Yes, of course, everyone cares about price. There's nobody with unlimited budget. But if they start getting into discussions like, well, can we drop the backup to lower the monthly price, or do you have to have a managed firewall or any of that stuff? Not a good sign. If they start nitpicking at the quote, if they start getting into things like, hey, can we do some of this migration to save some work? Case by case, usually that's a bad sign. I guess maybe I had one instance where that wasn't so bad. They had somebody technical who did a bunch of grunt work for me. I was fine with that. For me, it's mostly an attitude thing. Like, are they displaying qualities that show me that they care about their technology as a business driver, or is it kind of just they see us as the plumber or the electrician or something? And that's not in any way like a negative thing towards plumbers or electricians. Just, do they see us as the person who comes in, fixes the thing, and leaves? Then that to me is not a worthwhile company to work with.
Yeah, when we go through and we're doing like scoping with clients, we'll take our mission statement, their mission statement, and basically reiterate like, hey, we are a partnership, and this is what we can do. This is our added value, etc. But like, we're also vetting the client, the potential client, just as much as they're vetting us, for those reasons. Like, do they value technology? Are they just looking for someone to do break fix? Because that's not our stack, right? We're fully
Right.
integrated with them. And if it's clear that it's not going to be a partnership, that they're not looking to increase operational or security maturity, then we have no, I mean, we don't tell them badly, but we'll say, hey, at this point, like, we don't think that this is a potential fit, but we're happy to make references. And, if the partnership fits later on down the road, we can have this conversation again. It is nice to be able to do that. I understand that not all MSPs are in a position, or even the one-man bands to do that. But we actually, like, one of our recent clients, that was pretty interesting. They actually asked to interview employees and ask employees about, like, hey, what's it like working here, like mission statement, things like that. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's great. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I hadn't either. But that was a deciding factor in this client choosing us as their IT partner, which is pretty cool. I have a tangent. One of the easiest things to look at when you're doing recon on both MSPs or potential clients is their website. Does a bad website turn you off? Is that a red flag?
Define bad.
Does the website affect your judgment at all? I mean, we could, without defining bad.
Mostly no, unless there's some kind of like, right, we're talking about engineers and architects, so the design of the website, the content, I get that we're not creative people for the most part. I'm certainly not, right? So my website wouldn't look good. If I saw that it's 2023 and it's all like, or 2024 now, I guess, and we're still all over table layouts and there's like some flash stuff and all the old style web design, that might have a little bit of a red flag for me. But the design and content and all of that, or the blogs on the site or any of that kind of stuff, not really.
I think it depends. Like, if it is, I don't know. To me, if it's kind of clearly outdated, or if it's like I don't know, if it just looks rough or like a GeoCities type thing, like, yeah, I'm going to going to pass them a little bit of judgment, and that might be, hey, like, does this company not value technology? Like, it would be something that I look at. But I mean, if it's just like a standard boilerplate web, WordPress or Squarespace,
Yeah.
like, cool, that's like bare minimum. You should have at least that. So if it is just some weird, like, outdated thing from the 2000s, then I'm not gonna lie, it is play a part in what I'm looking at as far as good versus bad company. But it also depends. I mean, if it's like a restaurant, like, I'm still gonna go there to eat food.
Yeah.
Um,
What if it's a 90s 2000s style that has the little construction zone people saying website under construction? Is that a red flag?
um, I think it potentially could be. I think it. I would probably do more digging as far as, like, do they have any sort of social media presence at all? Like, maybe they don't use a website, maybe they use Facebook or something like that. But it would be.
So there's an interesting angle to this, though, because we just said at the beginning of this segment that someone having pop email could just be a sign that they need help, as opposed to a red flag of a good bad company. So I think what we're talking about here, the website, probably does matter if you're evaluating the service provider side, right? If I were looking at an MSP and I saw a website like that, I'd say, that's a little scary. But if I saw a potential customer or client with a site like that, then I wouldn't give that a second thought. That would just be, hey, we need to, as part of the engagement, either help them or refer them to a proper web designer.
Yeah, I think it depends on the industry type too, the vertical that they're in. So if it's something where it's more like on the construction side or labor, like, then they might not have a need for a website for something like a professional services engagement. But just an interesting scenario I thought I'd throw out there. But let's go ahead and get to our next story here. We have
Josh keeping us on track.
Yeah, I'm trying. Time's flying by, as it always does. But all right, we got proactive versus reactive scenarios. You hear it a lot. We need to be proactive and not reactive. So what I'm curious about is, we all know what reactive is and how it works. So that's the easy part. But what do we do to be proactive without looking like you're just making stuff up or billing the client wrong? He's not sure what can be done to be proactive without it just looking like a money-making scheme to them. Probably the only thing the company does, a weekly server check where the technician will review the event logs, check disk space, and assess the overall health of the server network. It usually doesn't take too much time in the big picture, but it lets the client know we're watching and checking for things before they're a serious problem. First off, my first MSP job, that was one of the things I did, is we did like it wasn't weekly, it was like monthly or quarterly, where it's like, oh, well, we'll go in, we'll clear the temp logs, we'll do the defrag, and then check the event logs. Like, dude, I was a level 1 technician. I did not do my due diligence at that time to, like, fully dig into that. But furthermore, like, that's something that should be automated. Like, most RMMs can do that. So that should be an
Wait, are there
automated
any that
procedure.
can't?
Not that I'm aware of.
I know we don't like to talk about RMMs, but yeah, I mean, same here. Way back when, yeah, that was okay, because that was a time that not all MSPs even had RMMs yet. But these days, hopefully they can all check event logs and install updates and things like that.
Yeah.
But I agree. We used to do that too. It was like monthly server maintenance for every client.
So proactive versus reactive. I mean, obviously, reactive is they're calling in and we're fixing the issue, but I think you get proactive by just doing the review. Like, hey, these are the types of calls that we've gotten over the last month or the last quarter, and is there a root cause analysis on those? Like, what can we do to prevent these from being called in? A lot of the projects, if they're agreeing to the projects where you're keeping things up to date or you're locking things down from the security side of things to prevent this reactiveness. So I think projects is a lot of the proactive alert. Security is a little odd because it is a mix of proactive and reactive, but I think it goes to, when we do the projects, right? Where, hey, we're putting this in so we're able to gather these logs, or we can get better alerting and things like that. But then, the alerts come in and we have to work them and make sure they're not false positive. And doing those projects can lead to more false positive alerts. But
Mhm.
I think in general, I think that's the easiest way to think about it is your proactiveness is kind of your, if you have like a fractional, VCIO or something like that, like doing a ticket review, doing project work will then lead to less on the reactive side. And if all you're doing is just being a help desk, then you're not doing anything proactive and you're just fixing the tickets as they come in.
The thing that I thought was really interesting about this question is something that I once struggled with, which is how do you bring up all of those things that you just mentioned without it being salesy, right? Without it look like you're just trying to upsell, right? Anyone who's watching has probably heard my semi rant about it's not consulting if your consulting meeting is just going down your line card and saying, do you have all this stuff, right? And this is kind of the same way, like from the client's perspective, it's very easy for natural and real recommendations, things like, hey, this very expensive server you need to replace is up for replacement, for that to look like an upsell to sell the hardware and to sell the project labor. And thinking about this question, I think what he's really asking is, how do I build trust with my clients? Because that's the answer. Um, Clients that you have what I would describe as relationship capital or trust with or long-standing working history with, don't question those kind of recommendations. And one of the ways to do that is to be truly honest about things that come up, including saying, no, you don't need this thing you just asked for occasionally, or not always trying to solve on the most expensive solution, or clearly putting all options out there. Here's without it being a good, better, best. Here's why you should go for the best one for sure. Just helping them go through the pros and cons of everything when you're solutioning. And honestly, spending less time solutioning and talking about products and more time just talking about their business over the course of the history of the client, right? Over the course of years, in some cases, that's how you build that trust, right? Genuinely showing them that you care about the outcome, even if they're choosing the option that doesn't generate the most margin in every case. So it's not an overnight thing, right? It's not like we're all programmers and engineers here. It's not a function that you put in, here's the right input, the output is they buy what we're talking about without thinking it's salesy. It takes some time, and it's another example of the relationship, I think, being more important than just the raw technical chops of someone who can go in and identify what's wrong with an environment. All of us can do that.
Yep. One, I
Okay,
mean,
I'm off my soapbox now.
not like when you say it's, not like a salesy thing. I mean, it kind of is though. That's how the sales should go, is it should be more of a business focused discussion rather than just an upsell opportunity. Hey, this is like this end of life server is adding risk to the environment. You have more risk not only from the security side but downtime. So although you're saving money by not buying it, you're potentially losing money on the labor and adding risk to your environment. So from a business side of it, and we need to look at replacing it. Or again, hey, you've had 20 of your clients we have 20 tickets basically saying, hey, they're having issues with this printer. This is lost productivity, so we need to look at replacing the printer. We all hate printers, but I literally have said more than once, in order for me to fix this, my hourly rate is $200 an hour. We could just buy another $200 inkjet printer and call it a day, right? Like maybe we need to look at getting a managed printer or something else, spending a little more, that way we're not spending so much time dealing with these. So again, making it the business, talking to the business side of things rather than just reacting and fixing the tickets.
So I have one more thing to add to this, and I know we're almost out of time. And I just made the mistake saying it, so I just want to highlight it. We, as MSPs, putting on my MSP hat, have to get out of this idea that sales equals bad. right? This idea of I don't want it to be salesy. You don't want it to be used car salesman, for lack of a better word. But actual consultative selling, that's providing value, right? That's not just like pushing product on people. And I think we've all just been burned so many times by hearing from vendors trying to push stuff on us that we've gotten this sales equals bad mantra, but that's not the case. Like it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, now I'm done soapboxing.
Perfect. All right. We'll run out of time, so I want to get this last story in. This one goes out to Spicy Monday from our friend Dean, aka Dr. Zoidberg. We're going to talk about titles for longtime employees, engineers, and what the titles given to the MSPs. The network engineer is the one that's in here, and that's the one that I wanted to bring up because that was my title at one point, and I wasn't a network engineer. I would say I have a pretty I would describe it as medium, but then if I start talking about networking, like it makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about. But to me, a network engineer is somebody who like is, kind of, CCNA or like is way more knowledgeable about networks, or that's kind of the focus of what they can do. They are able to go into there and do the CLIs and make all the fun networking stuff work. Right. And this was just like our base, like title, like you get hired, you are a network engineer, and really what you're doing is more of a sysadmin role or like a tech role, like not a network engineer. I'm sorry. Like I feel like your engineer needs to hold more weight, but like I have the same title as somebody who is like a legit network engineer making way more than me because they deserve it. And I'm not that knowledgeable in networks. In fact, funnily enough, I started doing more, the cloud, the Microsoft solutions. And at that point, I wasn't an engineer because I did everything. Like I would architect, design, implement, and all this stuff. So I changed my name in my email signature to Cloud Solutions Architect. And then nobody said anything until one day they're like, you have to have engineer in your name because that's how that's how the org chart worked or whatever. I was like, cool, I'm a Cloud Solutions Architect Engineer. Like this is a ridiculous title, but like the network engineer didn't fit at all what I did. And like, if I'm trying to sell somebody on a SharePoint migration solution or some sort of Azure solution, like, oh, I'm Josh, I'm a network engineer here. Like, here's the, like, it didn't fit. Right. But if I said it was our Cloud Solutions engineer, Cloud Solutions Architect, then it added a little bit of weight to it. But I think at the end of the day, I don't know, titles they're interesting. Or then you have those places that are trying to be cool and hip and like, oh, you're the IT ninja or the website guru, whatever. So what are your thoughts on the titles?
Well, we only have like 2 minutes, and I can say it in about 20 seconds. Titles mean absolutely nothing in IT because they're so varied. There's no standard. And like if I'm hiring someone and I see their title is systems engineer versus network engineer versus architect versus whatever, do not care because they don't mean anything anyway. And I just need to talk to them to find out what they actually did. Maybe there's some value in clients recognizing particular titles or taking more seriously. But honestly, like for me, it just didn't matter. We changed titles for our positions multiple times. Like there was one point where people who were on the help desk didn't want help desk in their title originally, so we made up something, like stuff like that. It's just not something we spent a lot of time worrying about because just because of the way that the MSP and IT industry works, they just don't mean anything.
Yeah, I think having maybe the defined roles is better, but my title is information security lead, which I would say is mostly accurate, but I do way more than just, it's like for our MSP, like there's a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with security that I do just because of my experience and wearing different MSP hats. Right. So if I were to put that on a resume, that in no way dictates that everything that I do and know. Right. So, titles are kind of BS. So But I will say I do like the idea of having the levels, right? Like if you have like dedicated support tech 1, 2, 3, like having a path, right? Because you kind of not really gamify it, but you have like a level up process and the steps that it takes to get there. So I am a fan of that, but yeah, at the end of the day, they're kind of BS, and the network engineer one just kind of makes me laugh because I was that, and
Yeah.
I'm not a network engineer.
That's a good point. I do agree with having a path, and in many orgs, having separate technical and managerial paths well defined. But I agree, right? What the specific titles are along that path doesn't mean much. It might mean a little more on the managerial side, just because you're overseeing people and they're a little more well established as far as what titles mean. Like, director with no direct reports. I've seen a few times. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I saw a director who didn't manage any managers, or didn't manage anyone, like let alone manage any managers. I'm like, what? How does this happen? And that's what I mean. Like, they just don't mean anything.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, like not to harp on it again, but it was funny meeting for like an Azure training thing I did. We introduced a person and it was like, oh, what do you do? Like, oh, I'm Josh, I'm a network engineer. This guy was a legit network engineer. He's like tries to go into network. I'm like, yeah, set up like networks with a couple VLANs, and this office can talk to this one using tunneler site to site, where he's got like 30 hospitals and they're all doing OSPF or BGP or whatever the heck it is. And he just smiled. He's like, you're not a network engineer. I'm like, no, I know I'm not. So, oh man. So yeah, I just wanted to, shout out to Dean for that. That was a fun one. Go ahead and read through that. There is some interesting tidbits on there, but, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, just come up with a scheme that makes sense, and maybe you put the levels on there. So if it's tech, admin, engineer, architect, level 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, but yeah, they don't really mean too much. So we are running out of time. So let's get our shout outs in here. We want to mention, if you want to give us some stories that you would like to see us talk about on the show, please go into our Discord. We can talk about them in there, or we can talk about them here. There's lots of things we talk about in the Discord, including a bi-weekly peer group that you can join, where we also show off our pets or just kind of hang out and get to know each other a little bit better. You got anything coming up, Matt?
Nope. I think you summed it up perfectly. Well, we can let it go on that.
Perfect.
Discord's fun.
Yeah, Discord's fun. Come check us out and hang out. So, all right. Well, on that, have a fantastic rest of your Friday and a fantastic weekend. Go outside, disconnect, and enjoy the weather.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.